Welcome to the Asset Preservation Hour. My name is Cynthia DeFazio, and I am joined today by Stewart Willis. He is president of Asset Preservation Wealth and Tax. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the markets today and what is the #1 mistake when it comes to retirement right now. So Stewart, let me ask you, first of all, how are you today?
Living the dream here, winding up the year, trying to catch my second wind here. We're going strong into the end of the year. It's the most important time of the year for sure. I mean, it's our planning season, our tax planning season. And
you're always so busy. Every time I see you, I know that this is the time that your beautiful wife, Shay, does not have a lot of time with you because you are so busy, but you're always passionate about tax planning.
Well, I know she probably told you to say that, again, to pressure me. But look, at the end of the day, I'm working 6-7 days a week right now. I think the growth of our company, the success of our company, in large part, is yes, we have an amazing plan, but we also outwork people. When I look on Instagram and Facebook, I mentor advisors all over the country, and I see that these guys are golfing 3 days a week, and a lot of them have shut down in December and January for just vacation. Right? They've turned it down, and that's our busiest season. It's our biggest time, and I think it's really important to make sure we don't lose sight of it. Keep our eye on the ball here. Know that tax season matters. Tax planning season matters. It's important.
Absolutely, it is. And I have to ask you, obviously, the markets right now. Oh my gosh, Stewart, you are my go-to for everything market related. But I have to ask you, what's happening right now? Yeah,
look, I mean, obviously, if we look back, it depends on what news channel you watch. You're going to see different news and how they present it to you. People tend to hang on to negativity when they invest, when they watch the news, etc. I try not to be that guy, but I think it's really important to hold, an accurate perspective of what's going on. And look, through the end of November, the market, the S&P 500 is up substantially. The bond markets have gotten smashed again, and we've seen a recent rally in bonds, which has been interesting. And I think most people just don't understand the risk that presents itself out in the markets here, right? Okay. And I think that when we look at things, I think it's really important to understand that the biggest risk, when you ask about the biggest risk, is really a lack of diversification. And I think people, Cynthia, just don't know what that really means.
Let's talk about that, because if you ask someone, are you diversified? Most people say, absolutely, I am. But that is not always the case. So explain that a little bit in detail.
Well, so diversification is usually looked at very narrowly, the way people, ask that question, the way the way they perceive diversification. When owning a bunch of different stocks doesn't really necessarily make you diversified if all of those stocks are in the same sector or they react the same way to the market, right? If owning a bunch of stuff doesn't diversify you per se, at least not in a true diversification perspective. Diversification of your investments is where diversification begins. You want to make sure that your different investments do different things. They have separate roles, right? Imagine a football team, that had 10 quarterbacks on the field at a time. Well, how's that going to work out, right? It's just not, right? I mean, it's not going to be a very good team, right? You get a bunch of people throwing to each other out there that can't run the ball. Right. But at the end of the day, every investment should have a role, just like a football team or a baseball team. And I think it's important to make sure that they do that. So a diversification of investments is important. And that's where people still have a terrible diversification in most of their investment portfolios. And so when we do an analysis, we look at how similar is one fund to the next. Because if they all do the same thing, they are the same fund. But diversification of investments is where it begins. And that's where most people end it. But there's multiple other kinds of diversification. Okay.
Talk to me a little bit about how important it is to have a perspective, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to, a diversification of perspectives, I think that what we've said about this in previous shows, and we'll say it again, is that, look, we are in a crazy world that's politically divided. If, here in Phoenix, it's a purple state now, and look, if you watch one news channel, you see the world one way. If you watch the other one, you see it differently, right? Whether it's liberal or conservative, different people interpret data differently. That is perspective, right? But as it pertains to your investments, when most people have a financial advisor, that person may be brilliant. They may be able to talk about, the standard deviation and beta and alpha and all these technical terms. And usually they try to talk above your head, and maybe they're better than you at picking investments. But I ask you this question: what if they're wrong? Most financial advisors pick their own funds for themselves, and they say, hey, I like this fund or that fund or this stock or that stock. People aren't right all the time. People get it wrong. And so if you're putting your entire life savings into the hands of one human being to get it correct all the time, that's a tremendous risk. So when we talk about diversification, we also believe it's important to have a diversification of perspectives, which means multiple points of view should be reflected in your portfolio. Look, we have one of the biggest money managers in the world managing some of our portfolios. We have an algorithm money manager. We use another money manager named David Young, spent 14 years at one of the big bond houses out in Newport Beach, California, that I can't name by name, but they're fantastic bond house. And look, he's a brilliant guy. But he's not right all the time, nor is anybody. People will get it wrong. And so when you bet your entire life savings on one human being correct, you're taking crazy amounts of risk, and you don't even realize it, because no matter how smart they are, they can't be right 100% of the time. And so when they get it wrong, you want to balance it out with other points of view, other perspectives.
Wanted to ask you a very quick question, Stewart, obviously, before we go to the commercial break. How is asset preservation, wealth, and tax different?
Well, I think number one, when we talk about diversification there, we're different because we also believe in a diversification of tax strategies. We focus very heavily on tax. Well, I know we're going to talk a bit extensively after the break about taxes, but look, we have a year-round tax staff. We have enrolled agents and CPAs working year-round in our Scottsdale office, in our Tempe office, in our West Valley Sun City Surprise office. And let me just tell you, taxes are important, right? And when we talk about diversification of tax strategies, what we've learned by having this big tax staff is that oftentimes things come up in life where people want access to the principal of their money, but they end up not taking a vacation or not buying a car because they're worried if they take it out of their IRAs, they're going to get slammed with a huge tax bill. And people all the time don't have access to the money when they need it because they get trapped by these big tax bills, and that's a problem.
Stewart, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, there's a number to call on your screen. That number is 833-602-7526. We realize you're in the viewing audience today and you're wondering how you are currently set up for your retirement. Are you diversified? Do you have to have your portfolio x-rayed to make sure? What Stewart is offering you today is the complimentary portfolio review. All you have to do is call in to 833-602-7526 or grab your smartphone, click on that QR code at the bottom corner of your screen. That will take you right to Asset Preservation, Wealth, and Tax landing page. He wants you to make sure that you have confidence and clarity as you plan for your retirement, and that means being very well diversified and having a proper tax plan. We'll be right back momentarily after this very short commercial break.
People are really concerned about outliving their money. Inflation, taxes, volatility in the markets, legacy. That's what people are really concerned about. Listen, I love what I do. When a client of mine can know with total confidence that they're going to be okay. At Asset Preservation, that's exactly what we do. Not only do we look at your investments, we look at your taxes and estate planning as well. We don't leave any stone unturned. That is what a real holistic shop does. Provide a very clear roadmap so that you know it's okay to enjoy retirement. Success is being able to sleep at night. And at the end of the day, what we provide at Asset Preservation is not only the market expertise by institutional money managers that are some of the biggest and best in the world, but we also provide complete advice. You need to make sure you have a plan. What you can expect from us is to let you know the truth about your portfolio.
We know the market is going to get worse from here. This is the biggest monthly decline in 10 years. People's 401ks took a major hit.
Well, my investments are tanking. My retirement isn't going as planned. I can't believe I let my kid talk me into buying crypto. I mean, what is that anyway?
This was the fourth worst contraction in history.
So how are you two doing?
Your financial future doesn't have to be uncertain. I'm Stewart Willis with Asset Preservation Wealth and Tax. If you have amassed a nest egg, it's time for a financial advisor to help you reach your retirement goals. We are in one of the greatest tax windows in history, so it makes sense to take advantage of this tax discount while you can with your partners in retirement. All of our expert advisors, CPAs, and enrolled agents are fiduciaries that specialize in retirement planning, tax mitigation, estate planning, and more. Plan your retirement right. Call right now for your own complimentary portfolio review and tax analysis.
Welcome back to the Asset Preservation Hour. My name is Cynthia DeFazio. I'm joined today by Stewart Willis. He is president of Asset Preservation Wealth and Tax, and we're talking about a lot of things based upon retirement, but I have to ask you a very important question, Stewart. A lot of talk right now surrounding Social Security. So I have to ask you, what is happening with Social Security? What changes are on the horizon? Should people be concerned?
Yeah, so obviously people have heard the pressure of Social Security, the finances of it, right? It's, just about 6 months ago, there was a projection that Social Security would be defunct by 2033. Well, about 2 months ago, we were just updated. Now it's 2032 if Congress doesn't act. And so a lot of people are scared that, if Congress doesn't act, we're going to see about a 24% reduction in the benefit, not only to people that haven't filed yet, but also to the people that have already filed. So that's a tremendous problem. Imagine a 24% reduction in your benefit. So is it in jeopardy? Well, I've been wrong before, but I've told people before, look, you're the biggest voting bloc in America as senior citizens. You need to vote. No one's going to touch it. And it's just not accurate. I was wrong. And because, look, in 2015, we saw one of the biggest guttings of Social Security during the Bipartisan Budget Act. They got rid of the file and suspend option, the file and restrict option, because the argument at that time was it only benefited the wealthy, right? It's the same thing we heard in 1983 from Ronald Reagan when they made Social Security taxable for the first time ever. That the higher income folks don't need Social Security as much, so they began to tax it. Here's the problem with the tax issue, is that they've never adjusted those tax thresholds. So if you have more than $44,000 of provisional income in retirement, then up to 85% of your benefit is taxable. Now, if you're married filing jointly, and the reason I'm saying I told you the threshold, $44,000, is that threshold was set back in 1993 and has never been adjusted for inflation. So imagine, 30 years later, what that number would be. I think it's like $115,000.
Wow.
So are you wealthy at $44,000 of income in retirement? Because that's who it was targeting at the time. I don't know. I think it's a bit low. I don't consider $44,000 wealthy.
Right.
But here's the thing, we're hearing the same things now. About 3-4 months ago, 5 months ago, I was watching a Senate hearing. I'm one of those, legislation nerds that pays attention to stuff that affects my clients, right?
Of course.
And I try to act, on their behalf as a fiduciary. But what I heard is during a hearing, when, Lindsey Graham and Bernie Sanders agree on the same thing, that's when I get scared. And what they agreed on, once again, is that higher income folks don't need Social Security as much. And to me, that's a dog whistle to say we're going to start taxing it more and more and more.
Sure.
Scary thing is, just about a month or so ago during one of the Republican debates, Chris Christie came out and said that what he said, he said Warren Buffett should not be collecting Social Security. I get it. I understand. But remember, that's just the entry point. Whether it's Warren Buffett or maybe it's, someone with less money, there's always a roof that you say, you define who the wealthy is. And then once you've taxed it, once you've applied something, it's easier to lower the roof on you. And that's what's happened during the Social Security taxation issue. So how do we plan around this? How do we think about this? It's about creating an environment for yourself in retirement that is efficient from a tax perspective by diffusing your tax time bombs. Because look, we're going to talk about taxes in a very deep way, and I think it's super important in our next segment here. But taxes are important because people were always told that if you put away your money tax deferred, that you could take it out in retirement when taxes are lower. What no one ever thought about was that by deferring taxes in retirement, you're now going to make Social Security taxable. When I talk about this in our live workshops here, and I do workshops in Scottsdale and in the West Valley, Peoria area, I do them also out in Chandler. We're doing a bunch for our Tempe office. People are so just shocked by how they're taxed on Social Security and never understood it because remember, theoretically, you say, okay, well, if you're wealthy, you don't need this. Well, everyone wants to be wealthy. They just don't want to be considered wealthy by the tax man. And I think you have to understand, once you've opened the gates, the floodgates, it's very easy to continue the taxation.
Absolutely. And Stewart, obviously we're going to take another commercial break shortly, but I want to ask you, because you're so passionate about talking about taxes with your clients, why do you see that as being a huge benefit for overall retirement planning?
Because it's just hugely overlooked. You know, people know that they need to plan taxes. They just don't, right? Because first of all, generally it's pretty expensive to do. If you're paying a CPA $150, $200 an hour to do it, people don't do it. You know, it's like when I'm talking to one of my lawyers that charges $550, $600 an hour, I'm like, look, make it snappy, wrap it up, make it quick, right? I don't want to talk all day. We're not friends. You just tell me what you need to tell me.
I need,
right? For $550 an hour, you better talk fast. At the end of the day, it's the same thing when it comes to tax planning. People just never go through it. Either it's expensive or they just don't have time themselves to do it, even though it's incredibly important. The reason the wealthy stay wealthy is that they plan, right? Look, don't care if you're a fan of Donald Trump or not, don't care, but I'm going to use an example. You know, there was that story I saw recently about him burying his ex-wife on Trump National Golf Course, right? Like, so right, was it New Jersey? And so the reason apparently, and I'm saying allegedly, so they don't sue me here, right? Allegedly, there's some, right? If you say allegedly or, you know.
Then you're safe.
Yeah, I'm safe, right? So allegedly there's, you know, protections in place for cemeteries that, you know, that immunize you from creditor attachment. Well, with all of these lawsuits and all that stuff going on, it's a smart move, right? It also has some tax implications for step up in basis and in inheritance tax and all those other things. And listen, I'm not saying go bury your wife in the backyard or your husband in the backyard. I'm not responsible for that. What I'm saying is have a tax plan. And if you're coming to me with burying your wife in the backyard, I'm not interested. I'm not helping you, all right? I'm certainly not bringing out the shovels. But listen, I think it's important to have a tax plan. That is part of your financial plan. And if you haven't addressed the tax concerns, if you're not taking advantage of the most efficient tax window in history right now, I'm telling you, you're missing out. You're going to look back at the next 3 years. If you don't take advantage of them, you're going to miss out. So what we're offering is a complimentary end-of-year tax planning review and portfolio analysis. If you give us a call at 833-602-7526, we'll tell you whether we believe a Roth conversion makes sense for you, whether it makes sense to harvest some of those losses against gains. Everybody's situation is different. You need a plan tailored to you. Pick up your phone, click on that QR code. It'll take you to the website. We'd be glad to help, but you have to take action today.
Stewart, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, that number to call, 833-602-7526. We know that you have a lot of questions for Stewart about your proper tax planning or perhaps burying relatives in the backyard. We don't know. But please don't miss the opportunity to go ahead and take advantage of this complimentary consultation, 833-602-7526. We're going to take a very short commercial break here on the Asset Preservation Hour. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, I want to talk to Stewart more in detail about taxes and also the Secure Act. Stay tuned.
They've got quite an extensive resume. Wow, so many years of management. Bet that was fun. So this job requires basic knowledge of the social media and video platforms, content creation, and SEO. How proficient are you in those areas?
Going back to work after retiring is not ideal. I'm Stewart Willis with Asset Preservation Wealth and Tax. If you have amassed a nest egg, it's time for a financial advisor to help you reach your retirement goals. We are in one of the greatest tax windows in history, so it makes sense to take advantage of this tax discount while you can with your partners in retirement. All of our expert advisors, CPAs, and enrolled agents are fiduciaries that specialize in retirement planning, tax mitigation, estate planning, and more. Plan your retirement right. Call right now for your own complimentary portfolio review and tax analysis.
Welcome back to the Asset Preservation Hour. My name is Cynthia DeFazio. I'm joined today by Stewart Willis. He is president of Asset Preservation Wealth and Tax, and we've been talking a lot about taxes, talking about being properly diversified. In this segment, I would love to ask you, Stewart, about the Secure Act. What exactly is it, and how did it impact so many?
Yeah, so the Secure Act is something that a lot of people don't know happened or existed. It was a change in the law. And in fact, in November of 2019, I went back to Washington, D.C. to lobby on behalf of this here. We met with, Dave Schweikert out of Scottsdale, Debbie Lesko out of Peoria, West Valley over there. That we met with the staff of Andy Biggs, Kirsten Sinema, and McSally, who was in office at the time. Okay. And what we were trying to do was argue on behalf of this law to be able to delay required minimum distributions for your IRA. Because when you have an IRA, the government forces you to take minimum distributions at 70.5, or they used to. Well, we got it delayed from 70.5 to 72 during the Secure Act. But something else was put inside that bill that we didn't anticipate. Because look, like in Congress, they aren't passing standalone bills. They always stuff it with something else, right? And what they stuffed it with was basically a line that eliminated the stretch IRA. So when you passed away when you passed away in the past, I don't know if that makes any sense. So that's kind of a weird sentence. Well, true though. Historically, when you were gone, when you passed away, you could pass your IRAs and 401ks over to your kids over their actuarial lifetime, right? And so they could stretch it out and basically turn your IRA into their own retirement plan, their inherited IRA. Well, what the Secure Act did is by eliminating the stretch IRA, they basically compressed the amount of time that the kids or the non-spouse beneficiaries, if it's your girlfriend, boyfriend, significant other, whatever, when you pass it to them, they now have to take it out within 10 years and pay tax on it within 10 years.
Wow.
So what does that do? It eliminates something that could have been paid out over 30 or 40 years
Absolutely.
to now 10. What does it do? Potentially forces them into higher tax brackets and so forth. And so it's a bit of a nightmare because by doing that, your idea was, hey, I'm going to defer all this money, take it out really slowly as a retirement pension plan or whatever in retirement. Now the kids are going to inherit it and have to pay tax. Because remember, in an IRA or a 401k, someone's going to pay tax on that. There's only one example of how not to pay tax on distributions from your IRA, and that's called qualified charitable distributions, right? And we talked about this in previous segments when it comes to tax planning. End of year tax planning is huge. And when you're taking your minimum distributions, remember, Uncle Sam is now saying, hey, I want a piece of it. You're going to have to pay tax on it. With a qualified charitable distribution, if you're over 70.5 years old and you're taking RMDs, well, you don't even have to be taking RMDs at 70.5, but you're allowed to start passing money to your charities of choice if they qualify, absolutely tax-free to you and tax-free to them. Because remember, they're a charity. They don't pay tax. So for a qualified charitable distribution, you can send your money to them tax-free. So a lot of our clients, when we go through our tax office and we're doing their tax preparation, they're tithing, they're giving away money to their church or to their charities. But because of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act raising the standard deduction so high, oftentimes they're not itemizing. So they don't even get a tax deduction anymore in many of these cases. But you know what? If you want to give that money and support that charity or church or whatever, you want to see if you qualify for a qualified charitable distribution. It's a great way to pass money and to do it super tax efficiently.
It really is. And Stewart, I should ask you, because you're always talking so confidently about taxes, why do a lot of other advisors shy away from taxes, if you will?
Well, most financial advisors, just are prohibited from talking about taxes, with their clients. If they work at a big box firm, they've, generally been told that you can't give tax advice. You'll see it at the bottom of your statements. Do not construe this as tax advice. And quite honestly, look, I talk about Roth conversions and tax planning all the time, and I know a lot of our audience has gone back to their financial advisors and asked them, you know why? Because a lot of those advisors are my friends, and they say, Stewart, you're killing me with this Roth conversion talk. You're killing me with this tax planning talk. Why, just stop it. You're killing me. And at the end of the day, it's because they're not allowed to give tax advice by their bosses, right? And oftentimes, even if they know that it makes sense, they oftentimes don't even give you advice on it.
Yeah.
And,
Unbelievable.
yeah, and I'll tell you this. Roth conversions, tax harvesting, it's incredibly important to have that sort of tax planning as part of your financial plan. And at the end of the day, listen, I jokingly say that these financial advisors are lazy because when I look at my Facebook page and they're golfing 3 days a week, and while I'm out here working 7 days a week,
Right.
they're golfing 3 days a week. It's because they just say, hey, you know what? That loudmouth Stewart, it might make sense. Why don't you go to your tax person and let us know. Your tax person says, oh, go talk to your financial advisor, and nothing ends up happening. And I'm telling you, we are in the most efficient tax window in history right now. And if you don't take advantage of this, where we are right now, this massive tax discount, you're going to look back. And I'm not saying that you need to bury your family members in the backyard to save the house, to save taxes, right? Don't do that. What I'm saying is have a real tax plan, have real tax advice. Do what the wealthy do and have a tax plan. It's not about what you make. It's about what you keep at the end of the day. And it's about what you preserve for future generations. It's in the title of the name of our company, Asset Preservation, Wealth, and Tax. Those are the important things to our firm, and if they're important to you, then you need to make sure that you have a tax plan. And if you want to find out if we're the right fit for you, then just give us a call at 833-602-7526. Even easier, pick up your phone, click on that QR code. It'll take you to assetpreservation.com. Sign up for a complimentary, absolutely free portfolio review. Take action. We'd be glad to help.
Stewart, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, we'd like to thank you for spending time with us today on the Asset Preservation Hour with Stewart Willis. That number to call is 833-602-7526. We know that you have a lot of questions for Stewart about proper tax planning and about if you're taking too much risk in your portfolio. He's here to help. If you have your smartphone handy, go ahead, grab it, click on the QR code at the bottom corner of your screen. That will take you right to Asset Preservation, Wealth, and Tax landing page. Be safe, be happy, and be blessed. We'll see you back 1 week from today, and thank you again for watching.